Welcome. We're so glad you're tuned in to another episode of The Catholic View for Women, news and views and truly a Catholic perspective. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my co-host Astrid Bennett Gutierrez from the Vita Initiative. She's the executive director. And of course, Janet Morana from Priest for Life, Silent No More, and Defending Life right here on EWTN. Before we move on with our topic for today, a special hello from our pastoral advisor, Father Frank Pavone, who works with us very closely here in making sure that everything we talk about is, of course, in line with Catholic teaching, and it is. Now, speaking of Catholic teaching on the life issues, many of you who are involved in the pro-life movement know that there's sad statistics when it comes to babies with Down syndrome and the high abortion rate, women who find out that their babies have Down syndrome. And so we're going to talk about the beauty of all children made in the image and likeness of God, and one family's experience with raising a beautiful, beautiful Down syndrome baby.
We were so blessed to meet the Odicino family in California, and they're a young family, young married couple who has a baby with Down syndrome. So they shared with us what some of the fears and some of the beautiful joys of having a baby with Down syndrome, and they were very open. So we have a beautiful clip with them.
What I liked about it in previewing the interviews and whatnot that we always do was that it was real.
Yes,
they talked about the
very
struggles.
honest.
They talked about, and we were mentioning this in our prep for the show, that there is a process you go through when you learn something like this.
Well, what people have to realize is that nowadays, OBGYNs, when you get into that second trimester, they want to do all kinds of tests, all right, starting with just all kinds of blood work, and they do these ultrasounds that are like an ultrasound, where they're really looking at that unborn child, measuring the head, measuring body parts, and they're really zeroing in, looking, and what they're looking for is any problems, all right? And so now it's not just Down syndrome. You can talk about trisomy 18, even cystic fibrosis. There's a whole long list that they will then sit with the parents and say, your baby has this problem or that thing, and you know, you might want to consider termination. They won't say the abortion word, they say termination. It's just terrible. I mean, we've gotten to this point, unless this baby's perfect, they're really talking to parents about...
Every baby's perfect.
I know, but I'm just saying, according to their tests. Of course, in our eyes, the church's eyes, in God's eyes, every child is perfect. But what they're doing is, it's almost like a search and destroy mission of, let's make sure this is, everything's wonderful, and if it's not so wonderful, then we can, have them start all over. It's terrible. But the Odicino family is so beautiful. I mean, young couple. I was, of course, privileged to go down to LA, be with Astrid for a few days. We did some interviews. And I mean, this was their first pregnancy, newly married. And the joy that that little baby Mildred brought to their lives is amazing. So why don't we take a look at the interview we did?
Found out at our 20-week ultrasound
that was a possibility.
That there was a possibility of Mildred having Down syndrome. The ultrasound showed a bright spot on her heart and some kidney issues that triggered it to go for a specialty ultrasound. And that, combined with the quad screen and blood test, indicated that we had a high chance of Down syndrome. The doctors suggested that we could do an amniocentesis, and that would confirm whether or not Mildred did have Down syndrome 100%. But we decided for us that we didn't want to take the risk of miscarrying that comes along with amniocentesis, and that for us, diagnosis of Down syndrome wouldn't change any decisions that we made about the pregnancy, and so we would just continue and keep praying for a healthy baby.
We went in how early?
Just a week early.
A week early, and pregnancy was going fine for the most part when it started. Megan ended up needing an emergency C-section though, so I actually was the first one to see Mildred up close. She had to be taken into the NICU. I followed her. And her pediatrician said that she saw soft markers physically on her for Down syndrome. We didn't get the confirmation though until probably the next day. They did a blood test and they found that she actually has Down syndrome.
I was totally in denial. We knew that Down syndrome was a possibility, but I think that I hadn't processed the reality of it happening for our child. And when that diagnosis hit, I had to go through a process of grieving the loss of the life that I had just assumed she was going to have, in a way. And certainly I wasn't disappointed in our daughter, and I love her, and she was, and continues to be healthy, and we're grateful for that. But I had to come to terms with our child having Down syndrome and what that would now look like for our lives and for her life. And in dealing with that, I felt like the Lord spoke very clearly to me. I formed you in the womb and I knew you. And I feel like he told me, I formed Mildred in your womb, and I formed her with 3 21st chromosomes, and that's the way that I intended her to be, and her life will be what I intended it to be. And I have seen that happen and seen the gift that she is in our life. Families on both sides of Mildred's family, and everyone was very supportive and very excited to celebrate her and to welcome her into our family and to be supportive in any way that we might need emotionally and medically, if there are any medical struggles. Fortunately, Mildred does not have any medical complications associated with her Down syndrome. So we haven't had to deal with the stress of those things, although I think we have the worry as a natural component of just being parents. But I think for us, I'll speak for myself. I had some anxiety about how the rest of the world would respond to my baby, and thankfully we've had nothing but love and nothing but support, especially in our church community. Our parish has embraced us and embraced Mildred, and just really helped us to celebrate the gift of her life and to enjoy her and love her. Hi. And just to continue to be active in that community, and to be a witness to other people, to let other people get to know Mildred, and to see that Down syndrome is not something that's scary. It's something that's beautiful and has blessings and difficulties, just like everything in life has blessings and difficulties.
So for me, I don't have this as much, but initially I always was very defensive of, are people going to try and lock her away in a group home or something like that? Are people not going to allow her to interact and be in society with everyone else? And so I got kind of defensive about anyone suggesting she might need occupational therapy, she might need this or that. My knee-jerk reaction was, no, she doesn't need it. She's fine. Don't try and put my daughter in a disability category. But the thing I guess I came to realize is that people have disabilities whether they have the chromosomal condition or not. And so the fact that she needs help, that she needs support in certain ways doesn't categorize her, doesn't put her in a box or pigeonhole her. But the same thing, everyone in my family, everyone on both sides of our family, all our friends have been completely supportive. No one's even, batted an eyelash at us keeping her, us having her. Everyone just loves her.
Say to another mom who's facing a diagnosis of Down syndrome that it's nothing to be afraid of. There's a lot of uncertainty in what that might mean for your child and what that might mean for your life. But the reality is that there's uncertainty with every pregnancy and every life. You may have a perfectly healthy baby and a perfectly healthy pregnancy and no chromosomal disorders, and then have something happen at any point in that child's life. And does that make you love them any less? No. It's scary, but with the grace of God, you get through. And I think there's a tendency, at least I experienced a fear. Yeah. I experienced a fear of not being enough for her, not being able to care for her needs, not being able to support her in the way that she needs. But the reality is that God has a perfect plan, and it's nothing to be afraid of. If anything, it's a complete joy and just the blessing of her disposition and her wonderfulness has been amazing in our lives. So having to go back to work after Mildred was born was difficult. I think it's difficult for any mom to face going back to work. But there was a special spot in my heart and a concern because of her special needs that it was hard to leave her. And we've made it work. You know, we're in a situation where we need to financially have that income. And it's good for Mildred to get to know different people and to spend more time with Grandma and Grandpa and have different interactions with different people. Something that we've been pleasantly surprised with is the support services for Mildred because she does have a disability. There are a lot of county and state support, and there are people that come to help us help her meet her developmental milestones. And that's been a really big blessing for us as parents to have the confirmation that we're doing what she needs. When my mom was pregnant with my younger brother, she had a bad test, and they actually did an amniocentesis, and it came back saying that my brother had, I believe it was water on the brain they were concerned about. And the doctors put a lot of pressure on her to abort, even all the way up into the 7th and 8th month. And this was 29 years ago, and they were still putting that pressure on her. And my mom and my dad, just being very pro-life, just prayed and trusted that God that His will would be done in their pregnancy. And my brother was born completely healthy, has been healthy his whole life, and actually has had no developmental delays or cognitive delays. He has his PhD in organic chemistry and is a very successful and wonderful man. So we never know what God is capable of doing above and beyond what science tells us.
Wow, what a beautiful couple, what a beautiful family.
And the beautiful point that you just made is that, you know, trust God. Don't worry about the science because they can be wrong, like they were in her brother's case. But even if the diagnosis is there, look at the joy Mildred brings to their family, their lives. And, you know, Astrid and I got to interact with her more. And first of all, I think we were astonished how good Mildred was through the entire interview.
So
I mean, you saw the mom and dad passing her back and forth, but I don't know how many babies would still be sitting so good like that. And then, of course, we got to hold her and play with her a little bit.
Oh my goodness,
chubby cheeks. I just want to eat her alive.
I know.
We
cute.
need stories like this.
Yeah.
Families saying we embrace life, and life is hard, life has surprises, but you know what? Just have a grateful, joyful attitude. Everything is going to be okay.
What is it with doctors? And you guys both work, I think, more closely with these situations because of your work with Silent No More and Priest for Life, and also yours in pregnancy resource centers and everything else. Why so much pressure if the families are willing to? Why?
Well, you know, Teresa, I think part of it is we're in a litigious society. There have been wrongful birth lawsuits successfully wrongful birth taken against doctors because of a child born with some disease or problem or defect, and then the parents said, oh, they didn't tell us during the pregnancy, so now we're going to sue the doctor because we could have terminated. They'll never say the word abortion. They always say termination. So therefore, the list keeps growing and growing and growing of the things that they look for, like I said, in the second trimester, and then they begin this counseling for termination.
Exactly. And it could be a small percentage of possibility of Down syndrome, and already they've put this fear into the couple.
Right.
And many couples, based on that possibility, will have abortions because there might be a chance of an imperfect child, even though in their heart they feel like it's our baby. doctors and nurses and counselors will tell them, you know what, you're better off having an abortion. We see it. It's the culture of death is really what it is. It's a throwaway society, and that's what we're seeing in the Hispanic community in particular. Tremendous pressure to have abortions, and women trust their doctors.
That's right.
And they feel in conflict, and the husband feels like, I should do the right thing by listening to the doctor. So many children are aborted, although I should say that a lot of Hispanic women do tell a doctor, I'm sorry, keep your advice, I'm having my child no matter what.
Right.
And then more often than not, the child is perfectly healthy. And so they say to the doctor, hey, here's my monster that I was going to have. They go back and say to him, my child's a blessing.
And what's the doctor's reaction? I'm just curious. Do they ever admit, oh, gee, maybe I should think differently about this?
Yeah, no, they just do what they're told in medical school, I suppose, right?
Yeah. I mean, at Priest for Life, we get stories all the time about this whole thing with Down syndrome because those tests can be wrong and have been wrong. In my book, Recall Abortion, I wrote a testimony of someone we know that said, they told my wife the child was going to be Down syndrome. They recommended termination. We said, absolutely not. This is our child. The child was born like in the other family's case, perfectly normal, perfectly fine. So the tests are wrong a lot of times, and perfectly healthy children are being aborted. But as we said from the very outset, from the moment of conception to natural death, every child is precious, and look how precious little Mildred is to her family. She really is.
Beautiful. What a beautiful story. We come back and we're going to have some resources and more discussions on this very special family. We're talking about a young family's baby with Down syndrome, also some other parents and families who are experiencing similar situations, and their beautiful stories, and also resources for you. We'll be right back on Catholic View for Women. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along, of course, with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana, my co-hosts on this program, talking in our episode today about a young family's baby with Down syndrome, their experience. And you saw that beautiful interview with the Odicino family and how they are just in love with that little girl and vice versa. And I thought it was very interesting, as we were saying before the break, that she's very realistic about some of the emotions that she went through.
Yeah, she is, because what struck me is when she talked about grieving what Mildred could have been calm. And you think about that, during your pregnancy, most moms will think about, oh, one day my daughter will get married and I'll have grandchildren. And you think of and she'll go to college and she'll do all these things. You kind of like have these dreams, And the way she talked about that process of grieving the child of the things Mildred could never do. And so I think that's a good thing to think about, because I think sometimes when we talk about these families, everyone thinks, oh, everything's perfect, everything's wonderful.
Or they're
One
somehow
extreme
they're
or the
saints
other.
and they
Right.
never have a struggle or anything
Exactly.
like that.
And so she emotionally, you figure you just give birth to a child, all this news is hitting you. And so she said, I had to grieve, but it was the scripture quote. Before you knew
I
me,
formed you in the womb, I knew you.
I knew you,
Yeah,
Jeremiah. And it was like
29:11.
God formed Mildred.
Right.
Therefore, there's something in this that God has a plan for Mildred in my life, my husband's life, our family's life. And somehow I'm going to trust. She moved from grief to trust. And I think that's really the thing here that's so important, that it's that transition of trusting in God, trusting in Him. His grace is always going to be there for us to give us the strength, no matter what the challenge is. Very often, like we're focusing on this particular case with Down syndrome, but I know there's a beautiful family, and Teresa, I know you know them, the Salter family in Michigan. Father Frank and I have met them many times.
Well, they actually had a special running on EWTN a few years ago about their story, and they're well known in Michigan. And Ellen Salter, of course, Megan's mom, is a speaker with Right to Life in Michigan. And I think when I think of Ellen, I think of Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans not to harm you, but plans to give you hope in a future.
Right.
Yes.
Every child, every person created in the image and likeness of God has hope and has a future, because they are just that, created in the image and likeness of God. And Ellen and I are very close friends, and I can remember her telling me from time to time the grieving process that she went through. For example, Megan is a special needs baby, and there's a lot of physical issues that she has.
Right.
That she remembers when she turned 5 years old, and she said, she would see the other parents walking their kids to school for their first to get the bus for kindergarten or something, and then every milestone
that she knew
right,
Megan
that there's that
couldn't do.
process. But at the same time, she says there is no better gift that she's ever been given, and that the family has grown through this. And his wonderful husband, Mike, he's just an amazing dad. But their other children have come not only to love Megan so much, but also to really take an interest in pro-life, and just have become these amazingly well-balanced kids who just get that, life comes with struggles, as the Odicino family said, and you can either embrace these and grow from the suffering. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. Or you can say, you know what, this isn't my plan, so I'm going to check out of this particular situation, whatever you're talking about.
Another aspect of the story of the Odicino family, Megan is her name as well, is that she also felt insecure. Will I be the right mother for this baby? Will I be able to help her in the things that she needs? And it reminded me of my friend Letitia Velasquez from Connecticut. She also has a ministry to mothers and children with Down syndrome. She herself has a Down syndrome daughter. She wrote something called in her blog, a special mother is born. So not only a special child, but a special mother. So it's a beautiful vocation. And you can see the joy in Megan's face during her interview, that God will provide the graces for you to be that mother for that child. And in turn, that child will come into that family to bless them. And yes, you see in the baby that, little Millie, or Down syndrome children, any child lights up the room. Their children, their blessings. And God has a special plan for that baby and for all the lives that baby and that child's going to touch.
What's the statistics of abortion rate? Is it 90%?
Yeah, 90%. 90% of Down's children. And then there's all kinds of other things, like, for example, trisomy 18, and I think
Senator Santorum was made
Senator Santorum's child, Bella, and she has outdone the odds, basically, because babies born with trisomy 18 usually only live maybe a few days, a few weeks, not very long at all. And Bella was born on May 13th, 2008. I mean, she's over 8 years old already, and she's still here and bringing joy. I mean, the beautiful book written by Senator Rick Santorum and his wife Karen, and of course she's a nurse. And some people might watching me say, oh, well, I'm sure they had plenty of resources and she was a nurse. But with Bella, it involves basically round-the-clock care. So it's not just Rick and Karen, but all the other children and extended other people coming into their lives. I mean, I know this book is at the EWTN Religious Catalog, and they've been on the network before about Bella. But what's so beautiful in here is when you look at the pictures that are in this book of the family, everyone's celebrating Bella every step of the way. Her 5th birthday, her this birthday, and all the other siblings helping in her care.
It's like the same thing with the Salter family.
And the Salter
in
family
Michigan.
does the same thing.
Yeah.
The child becomes part of all the family celebrations and whatever they do. And I know with the Salter child, Megan, I've seen her at pro-life events.
Right.
Where and she was at Deacon
She was at
Dom's,
Dom's ordination.
Dom's ordination.
Yep.
You know, and this is what the really thing. They're not isolated or kept separate, and it doesn't stop the family from doing what they should be doing. But in this book, written by Karen and Rick, there's a beautiful part here that Karen writes. I'd like to read it because I think it's an encouragement to all families
Real
that
quick,
are
we
faced.
only have a few minutes left, so we have to also get to our homework.
So here it goes. It's true that God doesn't give us more than we can handle, but that doesn't mean we won't be stretched thin and at times broken in the process. Place all your trust in God and lean on Him. Pray fervently. One of my favorites is the universal prayer. Lord, I believe in Thee. May I believe more strongly. I trust in Thee. May I hope. May I be confident in Thee. May I love Thee more ardently. May I learn the nothingness of this world, the greatness of heaven, the shortness of time, and the length of eternity. And then she goes on to say, your child will help you to grow in love and in holiness. And I think...
And be a witness to so
and
many.
be a witness
and
to so
your
many.
sacrifice dedicated to raising your children is going to
I
be a
think this book
sacrifice and a
is a
witness.
great
Yes.
encouragement for that, you know?
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, and of course, with speaking of homework, this is one of our homework assignments. It's a great, encouraging book called Bella's Gift, available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And of course, Pope St. John Paul II wrote a beautiful book we have. It's called Letter to Families, and that's also available at the Religious Catalog. And it's the Saints' Reflections on the Grandeur of Marriage and Family Life. So it's lots of great encouragement there. And then also, too, there's a book to read, Special Children Blessed Fathers by Randy Hain, also at the Religious Catalog. And finally, let's not forget the Catholic View for Women, our website, catholicviewforwomen.com. You can go there for more information. You can view previous episodes, the homework, everything we're telling you here is up on our website. And of course, you can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter. And of course, go to Facebook and like us, the Catholic View for Women. And finally, I just want to remind also our viewers that at the EWTN Religious Catalog, they sell the DVDs of this entire series. So maybe you want to use that as a study group for your women's group or your Bible study or your prayer group. And finally, reminder of our beautiful kitchen Madonna here. And she also available at the catalog, but she's a beautiful holy reminder, as Mother Angelica always said, in your home.
Yep. And of course, everything, more information on our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Morana. We'll see you next time on The Catholic View for Women.